Rain slams against bulletproof glass while a woman bleeds on marble floors. Her husband, the most dangerous man on the East Coast, stands over her with a belt still warm from her skin. His mistress watches from silk sheets, smiling. 6 months later, that same woman runs through a forest with twins growing inside her belly while bullets chase her into darkness. The man who saved her dies in the mud. The husband who destroyed her will spend 5 years drowning in his own kingdom's blood before he finally understands what he murdered. This is the story of Elara Vescari, the quiet wife who became the storm no one saw coming. If you want to see how far a broken woman can rise and how low a king can fall, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Ban. The first time Damien Vescari made Elara bleed in public, she was 24 years old and still believed marriage could be survived through silence. The Valeria State dining hall stretched like a cathedral of wealth. Vaulted ceilings, imported Persian rugs, walls lined with oil paintings of dead men who'd built empires on other people's suffering. Chandeliers hung like frozen explosions of light above the long mahogany table where 15 made men sat with their wives, their plates untouched, their attention locked on the head of the table where Damien held court like the king he'd become at 31. He wore a three-piece suit the color of midnight. His dark hair was combed back with the kind of precision that suggested violence lived just beneath the surface. When he spoke, everyone leaned forward. When he went silent, the room held its breath. Beside him sat Celeste Arden. She wasn't his wife. Everyone knew it. Elara knew it. The knowledge sat in her throat like broken glass every single day. Celeste wore crimson silk that clung to her body like a second skin, her blonde hair cascading over bare shoulders, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. She laughed too loud at Damien's jokes, touched his arm too often, made eye contact with Elara across the table like a predator reminding prey exactly where it stood in the food chain. Elara sat 3 seats down from her own husband. She wore a modest cream dress with long sleeves that hid the bruises from last week when she'd accidentally interrupted one of Damien's phone calls. Her brown hair was pulled into a neat bun. Her hands rested in her lap. She'd learned early that stillness was survival. The dinner conversation rolled over her like distant thunder. Talk of shipments, territories, rival families making moves in Brooklyn. Elara understood enough to know these men controlled half the illegal trade flowing through New York. She understood enough to know her husband's word could end lives before dessert was served. She also understood she was nothing more than a decorative piece of furniture. Damien had married her because her father owed debts that couldn't be paid in cash. The marriage contract had erased those debts. It had also erased Elara's future. 3 years later, she was still waiting for him to look at her like she was human. Coffee arrived in delicate porcelain cups. Elara's hands trembled as she lifted the silver pot to pour for the wives seated nearby. A gesture of servitude she'd never been asked to perform, but had adopted anyway because it gave her something to do besides exist. The pot was heavier than expected. Her wrist bent wrong. Hot coffee arced through the air in slow motion, splashing across Celeste's crimson dress, across her exposed collarbone, across the diamond necklace Damien had given her last month for no reason other than because he could. The room detonated into silence. Celeste shot to her feet, gasping, her dress stained dark and wet. Every man at the table froze mid-bite. Wives pressed back into their chairs. Even the servers against the wall stopped breathing. Elara's voice came out strangled. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean—" "You stupid bitch!" Celeste's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. Elara flinched. "Please, I'll pay for the dress. You think you can pay for anything?" Celeste stepped closer, her heels clicking against marble like countdown timers. "You think your pathetic little allowance covers what you just ruined?" Damien still hadn't moved. He sat perfectly still, one hand resting on the stem of his wine glass. His expression carved from stone. His dark eyes tracked the scene with the detached interest of a man watching insects fight. Elara's throat closed. "Damien, please, take off your belt." His voice was quiet, calm. The kind of calm that preceded executions. Every person in the room understood immediately. Celeste's smile returned, slow and poisonous. Elara shook her head, her pulse hammering against her ribs. "No, please, not here." Damien stood. He moved with the fluid grace of someone who'd grown up learning how to hurt people efficiently. 6 feet 2 inches of controlled violence in an expensive suit. He unbuckled his leather belt without hurry, sliding it free from the loops with a soft whisper of sound that made Elara's stomach drop into hell. "Damien," her voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever." "Sit." He pointed at a chair near the fireplace, a high-backed antique with carved arms and no cushions. Elara couldn't move. Her legs had turned to water. Tears blurred her vision, but she blinked them back because crying only made things worse. It always made things worse. 2 of Damien's soldiers, Luca and Santino, men she'd served coffee to 100 times, stepped forward without being asked. They gripped her arms with impersonal efficiency and dragged her to the chair. "Please." The word came out broken. "Please don't do this." Damien's expression never changed. They forced her into the chair. Luca produced zip ties from his jacket pocket, the industrial kind used for restraints, not packages, and bound her wrists to the chair arms while Santino secured her ankles to the legs. Elara pulled against the restraints, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "Damien, I'm your wife." "You disrespected what's mine." His voice remained terrifyingly even. "That has consequences." Celeste leaned against the table, arms crossed, watching with the satisfied smile of someone who'd just won a game no one else knew they were playing. The belt whistled through the air. Pain exploded across Elara's back, white hot, all-consuming, stealing the breath from her lungs. She bit down on her lip hard enough to taste copper, refusing to scream, refusing to give Celeste that satisfaction. The second strike landed harder. The third shattered her resolve. She cried out, a raw animal sound that echoed off the vaulted ceiling and probably carried through the entire mansion. Somewhere deep in her mind, she registered the wives looking away, the men staring at their plates, the servers pretending they were invisible. Damien didn't stop. 5 strikes. 10. 15. Her dress tore. Blood seeped through fabric. The zip ties cut into her wrists as she thrashed involuntarily, her body trying to escape what her mind had already accepted as inevitable. When he finally stopped, Elara hung limp against the restraints, sobbing quietly, her entire back a landscape of fire. Damien dropped the belt on the floor beside her. "Clean yourself up." He didn't look at her face. Hadn't looked at her face once during the entire ordeal. "You're embarrassing." Then he returned to his seat, picked up his wine glass, and resumed his conversation about shipping routes as if nothing had happened. Celeste pressed a kiss to his temple before gliding past Elara toward the bathroom to change, her smile vicious and triumphant. They left her tied to the chair for another hour. By the time Luca finally cut the zip ties, Elara couldn't feel her hands. Blood had dried sticky and uncomfortable against her skin. Every breath hurt. Standing hurt. Existing hurt. "Go upstairs," Luca muttered, not meeting her eyes. Guest room at the end of the east wing. Not her bedroom, not the one she technically shared with Damien despite him never sleeping there. The guest room. The place where inconvenient things were stored and forgotten. Elara climbed the stairs alone, each step a small agony. The mansion stretched around her, 40 rooms of marble and mahogany and imported everything, all of it cold, all of it hollow, all of it belonging to a man who saw her as less than human. The guest room was small by the estate's standards. A double bed with plain white sheets, a dresser, a single window overlooking the gardens where Damien sometimes walked with Celeste, their laughter drifting up like mockery. Elara locked the door and stumbled into the attached bathroom. The mirror showed her what she'd become. Pale skin, hollow eyes, blood-stained dress, hair falling loose from its bun in tangled strands. A stranger wearing her face. She turned on the shower and peeled away her ruined clothes with shaking hands, biting back whimpers as fabric stuck to open wounds. The hot water hit her back like liquid fire, but she stood under the spray anyway, watching pink-tinged water circle the drain, wondering how much of herself had already disappeared down similar holes over the past 3 years. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel, her reflection looked even worse, bruises blooming across her wrists, her back a mess she couldn't fully see but could certainly feel. She pulled on the spare nightgown someone had left folded on the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. That's when the nausea hit. It came in waves, sudden, overwhelming, undeniable. She barely made it to the toilet before her stomach emptied itself violently. When the retching finally stopped, she sat on the cold tile floor, breathing hard, trying to remember the last time she'd felt this sick. Then her blood went cold. Her last period. When was her last period? Elara's hands went to her stomach, pressing against the flat surface beneath her nightgown, her mind racing backward through weeks of existing in survival mode, of not paying attention to her own body because paying attention meant acknowledging how badly everything hurt. 6 weeks, maybe 7. Oh God. She crawled to her purse, the small bag she'd been carrying earlier, now tossed on the bathroom counter. Her fingers fumbled through the contents until she found what she was looking for. The pregnancy test she'd bought 2 weeks ago. She'd told herself it was paranoia, stress, her body reacting to constant fear. But she'd bought it anyway, hidden it, forgotten about it. Until now. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the test twice while opening the package. She followed the instructions with the mechanical precision of someone in shock, then set the stick on the counter and waited. 3 minutes felt like 3 hours. When she finally looked, 2 lines stared back at her. Positive. Elara sank to the floor, her back pressed against the bathtub, the test clutched in her trembling hand. She was pregnant, with Damien Vescari's child, the man who'd just whipped her bloody in front of 15 witnesses. Tears spilled down her cheeks, not from pain this time, but from the crushing weight of impossible choices. She couldn't raise a child in this house, couldn't subject an innocent life to this violence, this coldness, this hell disguised as wealth. But she also couldn't leave. Damien's reach extended across state lines. His network touched every major city on the East Coast. Women who tried to run from men like him ended up in ditches or concrete foundations. She pressed her free hand against her stomach, feeling nothing yet but knowing something was growing there anyway, a tiny spark of life that deserved better than this. A spark that gave her something she'd never had before. Purpose. Elara stood slowly, her legs steadier than they'd been in hours. She walked to the window and stared out at the darkened gardens, at the lights of the city beyond the estate walls. For 3 years she'd been a ghost. For 3 years she'd apologized for existing. But somewhere beneath the fear and the bruises and the broken pieces, something older and fiercer began to wake up. Something that remembered she'd once been a person with dreams and plans before debt and marriage contracts had turned her into property. She placed both hands on her stomach and whispered into the darkness, "I won't let him destroy you." The words felt like a vow, like the first true thing she'd said in years. Whites. Elara returned to the main house the next morning. The dining hall had been cleaned, the chair was gone. No evidence remained of what had happened except the wounds on her body and the memory branded into everyone's mind. She found Damien in his study, a massive room lined with leather-bound books he never read and maps marking territories he controlled. He sat behind a desk made from reclaimed wood that probably cost more than most people earned in a year, reviewing papers with the focus of a CEO rather than a crime lord. Celeste lounged on the leather sofa nearby, filing her nails, wearing one of Damien's shirts like a trophy. Elara knocked on the open door. Neither of them looked up. "I need to speak with you." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Damien signed something without glancing in her direction. "I'm busy. It's important." "Then it can wait." Celeste smiled without looking up from her nails. "Maybe you should go practice carrying coffee pots. You know, get some training in." Elara's jaw tightened. "I'm pregnant." The room went silent. Damien's pen stopped moving. Celeste's nail file froze mid-stroke. For 5 full seconds, nobody breathed. Then Damien lifted his head slowly, his dark eyes finally meeting Elara's for the first time in months. "What did you say?" "I'm pregnant." She forced herself to hold his gaze. "The baby is yours." Celeste sat up straight, her expression shifting from smug to calculating in an instant. Damien set down his pen with deliberate care. "How far along?" 6 or 7 weeks? Or his face revealed nothing. He could have been discussing shipping schedules for all the emotion he showed. "Have you seen a doctor?" "Not yet." "Do it today." He returned his attention to the papers. "Let me know the results." That was it. No questions about her health, no acknowledgement of what this meant. No recognition that he'd beaten her bloody while she was carrying his child. Elara stood in the doorway, something cracking inside her chest that felt disturbingly close to freedom. "That's all you have to say?" "What else is there?" Damien didn't look up. "You're pregnant. You'll see a doctor. We'll deal with it." Deal with it. Like she was a problem to be managed. Like the baby was an inconvenience to be scheduled between business meetings. Elara turned and walked away before the tears could come, before her voice could break, before she gave either of them the satisfaction of seeing her hurt. But as she moved through the mansion's cold hallways, something shifted in her chest. The fear was still there. The pain was still there. But now there was something else too. Rage. Cold, quiet, patient rage. The doctor confirmed twins. 2 daughters, the ultrasound revealed. Tiny flickering heartbeats on a black and white screen that made Elara's breath catch in her throat. She sat in the private medical clinic Damien's organization kept on retainer, staring at the monitor while the doctor explained due dates and nutrition and prenatal vitamins. The words washed over her like radio static. 2 babies, 2 lives depending on her. 2 reasons to survive. When she returned to the estate that evening, she found Damien in the same study, working late as always. This time, Celeste wasn't there. Elara placed the ultrasound photos on his desk without saying a word. Damien glanced at them briefly. His expression flickered, something too quick to name, before settling back into its usual cold mask. "Twins." "Girls," Elara said, "both healthy." "Kids," Elara. He picked up one of the photos, studying it with the same detached interest he might give a financial report. Then he set it down and returned to his work. "The doctor said I need rest. Reduce stress." Elara kept her voice flat. "He said the trauma to my back could have caused complications. We were lucky it didn't." That made Damien pause. For just a moment, something almost human crossed his face. Regret, maybe. Or calculation about damaged assets. "You'll have whatever you need," he said finally. "Staff will be informed you're not to be disturbed unnecessarily." "That's it?" His eyes lifted, cold and dark. "What do you want me to say, Elara?" "I want you to acknowledge you almost killed your own daughters." The words hung in the air like smoke. Damien's jaw tightened. "I didn't know." Would it have mattered? The question landed like a blade. For the first time since she'd known him, Damien Viscari looked uncomfortable. Not guilty, she wasn't sure he was capable of guilt, but unsettled, like he'd encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with money or violence. "Get out," he said quietly. Elara left without another word, but she took the ultrasound photos with her. The pregnancy changed everything and nothing. Damien didn't visit her room, didn't ask about her health, didn't acknowledge the daughters growing inside her except through intermediaries, doctors, staff, lawyers updating insurance paperwork. But he stopped looking through her like she was invisible. Now when their paths crossed in hallways, his gaze tracked her with an intensity that felt like being studied, examined, assessed. Celeste noticed immediately. The mistress had always been beautiful, but now her beauty took on a desperate edge. She wore more makeup, shorter dresses, laughed louder, touched Damien more possessively, and she watched Elara with the focus of a predator sensing a shift in the hierarchy. By the 4th month, Elara's body had begun to show. Her stomach curved gently beneath loose clothing. Her face filled out. Her hair grew thicker. She looked healthy for the first time in years. That terrified Celeste more than anything. Because everyone in the organization understood the math. A wife could be ignored. A mistress could rule from the shadows. But a mother, especially a mother of daughters, heirs to a criminal empire, became untouchable. Celeste had built her entire existence on being the woman Damien wanted. If he started wanting his wife instead, if fatherhood awakened something human in him, if those babies shifted his priorities toward legitimacy and family, she'd lose everything. So she did what smart predators do when threatened. She adapted. The first whisper came during a charity gala at the Viscari estate. Elara stood near the windows, wearing a black maternity gown that accommodated her growing belly, watching wealthy people pretend to care about whichever cause they were throwing money at this month. She'd learned to navigate these events through invisibility, stand near walls, avoid conversation, leave early. But tonight, A woman approached her. Isabella Moretti, wife of Damien's underboss, Lucian. A woman with too much cosmetic surgery and too little warmth in her smile. Elara, darling. Isabella's voice dripped with false sweetness. You're positively glowing. Thank you. Twins, I heard. How exciting. Isabella sipped champagne. Although I have to say I'm surprised. Elara's guard went up. About what? Well, Isabella leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I would have thought Damien would be more careful, given everything. I don't understand. Isabella's smile sharpened. Oh, you know, the rumors about you and that young soldier. What's his name? Nico? The blood drained from Elara's face. Nico Valles. 23 years old, kind eyes, gentle hands. He'd helped her once when she'd dropped groceries in the kitchen, had asked if she was okay, had treated her like a human being instead of furniture. They'd spoken maybe 5 times total. There are no rumors, Elara said coldly, because there's nothing to rumor about. Of course not, darling. Isabella patted her arm with false sympathy. But you know how people talk, especially when a pregnant wife suddenly seems so secretive. Always in her room, never around her husband, makes people wonder. She drifted away before Elara could respond, leaving poison in her wake. Over the next weeks, the whispers multiplied. Little comments from wives at dinners, knowing looks from soldiers in hallways, questions about whether the babies were really Damien's. It was expertly done, nothing overt enough to be confronted, but persistent enough to plant seeds of doubt. Elara tried to ignore it, tried to focus on staying healthy, keeping her daughters safe, counting down the days until birth when she could finally figure out an escape plan. But the campaign against her was just beginning. By the 6th month, Damien's behavior toward her had changed. The attention she'd noticed earlier had curdled into suspicion. He watched her now not with curiosity, but with calculation. Guards appeared in hallways where she walked. Her phone calls were monitored, her internet usage tracked. She hadn't done anything wrong, but it didn't matter. Someone was building a case against her, brick by brick, lie by lie. The night everything collapsed started ordinarily enough. Elara sat in her room reading baby name books, feeling her daughters kick and roll inside her belly. The pregnancy had been difficult. Exhaustion, swollen ankles, back pain. But these quiet moments made it bearable. A knock sounded at her door. Come in. Luca entered, his expression unreadable. Boss wants to see you, his study, now. Elara's stomach dropped. What's this about? Didn't say. She followed him through the mansion, her heart hammering against her ribs, her hands instinctively protective over her belly. Damien's study doors stood open. Inside, harsh overhead lights had replaced the usual warm lamps. Damien sat behind his desk, face carved from granite. Lucienne Moretti stood beside him, the underboss with political ambitions and cold eyes. 2 other soldiers flanked the door. Celeste perched on the arm of the leather sofa, perfectly positioned to watch whatever was about to happen. Sit. Damien's voice was arctic. Elara lowered herself into the chair facing the desk, every instinct screaming danger. Damien pressed a button on his laptop. A recording began to play. Elara's own voice filled the room, tinny through laptop speakers, but unmistakably hers. The shipment arrives Thursday at Pier 17. 6 containers marked agricultural equipment. The real cargo is in the middle too. Weapons, military grade. Elara's blood turned to ice. She'd never said those words, never had that conversation, never knew those details. That's not me. Her voice came out strangled. I mean, that's my voice, but I never... Damien pressed another button, different recording, same voice. He trusts me completely, doesn't monitor my movements anymore. I can photograph documents from his study without him noticing. No. Elara shook her head violently. No, I never said that. I don't even go in your study without permission. This is fake. There's more. Damien's tone remained terrifyingly calm. He pulled out a folder, slid photographs across the desk. Elara stared at images of herself meeting someone in what looked like a coffee shop. Except she'd never been to that coffee shop, never worn those clothes, never met that person. Photoshopped, she whispered. These are fake. All of this is... We found these in your room. Lucian held up 3 burner phones. Taped behind your dresser. Elara shot to her feet, her chair scraping back. I've never seen those before. Someone planted them. Sit down. Damien's voice cracked like a whip. She sat, trembling, her hands pressed against her pregnant belly, tears streaming down her face. This is insane. I would never betray you. I don't even know how to betray you. I don't know enough about your business to... You know enough. Lucien's smile was poison. A wife hears things, pillow talk, late-night phone calls, meetings in the study, little details that seem meaningless alone but become valuable when fed to the right people. I'm not feeding information to anyone, Elara's voice broke. Damien, please. We've been married 3 years. Have I ever given you any reason not to trust? You've given me children that might not be mine. The words hit like bullets. Elara's world tilted. What? The timing lines up perfectly with when you and that soldier started getting friendly. Nico? Are you serious? She laughed, a desperate, broken sound. I've spoken to him maybe 5 times. He helped me carry groceries. That's it. That's the entire relationship. DNA test after birth will tell us the truth. Damien leaned back in his chair, studying her like a specimen. Until then, you're under house arrest. No phone, no computer, no unsupervised contact with staff. You can't be serious. The penalty for betrayal in my organization is death. His eyes were dead, empty. The only reason you're still breathing is those babies. If they're mine, they stay. You don't. The room spun. What? You die after they're born. He said it like he was discussing tomorrow's weather. The girls will be raised by someone loyal, someone trustworthy, not a federal informant. I'm not an informant. Elara's scream tore through the study. I'm your wife, the mother of your children. How can you believe? Get her out of my sight. Luca and Santino moved forward. Elara thrashed in the chair, her hands clutching her belly, protecting her daughters even as everything else crumbled. Please! She looked directly at Damien, searching for any trace of the man she'd married, the man she'd once hoped might learn to love her. Please, if you ever felt anything for me, anything at all, don't do this. Don't punish our babies for something I didn't do. Damien's face remained stone. Celeste smiled from the sofa, satisfied and victorious. As the soldiers dragged Elara toward the door, she saw it, just for a second, a flicker of something in Damien's eyes. Doubt, maybe. Or regret. But it disappeared too quickly to matter. The door slammed shut behind her, and Elara found herself in hell disguised as a mansion, pregnant with daughters her husband planned to steal before murdering their mother. From somewhere deep inside her chest, beneath the terror and the tears, something cold and diamond-hard began to form. Survival instinct. Because if Damien Viscari thought she'd just lie down and die, he'd forgotten who she'd been before he'd tried to break her. And somewhere in this mansion, someone still remembered what she'd once done for them. Someone who might just owe her a life. They locked her in the East Wing bedroom with bars on the windows. Not actual bars, nothing so honest. These were decorative wrought iron installed under the pretense of security, elegant enough that guests would never question their purpose. But Elara understood immediately. She'd gone from wife to prisoner in the span of a single conversation. The room itself mocked her with its luxury. King-size bed with silk sheets, antique furniture worth more than most people's homes, a private bathroom with marble counters and gold fixtures, everything beautiful, everything cold, everything a cage. A guard was posted outside her door. Marco, mid-30s, dead eyes, the kind of man who followed orders without asking questions. She'd seen him break someone's arm once in the mansion's garage for stealing a case of wine. He'd done it with the same expression he wore now. Nothing. Elara stood at the window, hands pressed against the glass, staring at the gardens below where moonlight painted everything silver. Her daughters moved inside her belly, restless, agitated, sensing their mother's terror through whatever mysterious connection existed between bodies. She was 6 months pregnant. 3 months until Damien murdered her and took her babies. 3 months to find a way out of hell. Her hands moved to her stomach, fingers splayed protectively over the curve. I won't let him, she whispered. I promise you, I won't let him. The words felt hollow in the expensive silence. The first week passed in suffocating isolation. Meals arrived on trays brought by staff who wouldn't meet her eyes. No phone, no computer, no television, just books she couldn't focus on and a radio that only played classical music, as if even her entertainment had been carefully curated to prevent contamination. Damien never visited. Celeste did. The mistress appeared on the third day, dressed in cream linen that made her look like an angel, if angels had poisoned smiles and shark eyes. She carried a vase of white roses, expensive, perfect, and completely soulless. "I thought you might want some company." Celeste set the vase on the dresser, then settled into the armchair near the window like she owned the space, like she owned everything. Elara sat on the edge of the bed, her hands instinctively protective over her belly. "What do you want?" "Just checking on you, making sure you're comfortable." "I'm a prisoner." "Oh, don't be so dramatic." Celeste examined her manicure. "You're being kept safe, protected. Damien's just being careful until he knows for certain those babies are his." "They are his." "Maybe." Celeste's smile never reached her eyes. "Or maybe they're that soldier's. Nico, right? Such a sweet boy. Always so helpful. I can see why you'd be drawn to him." Elara's jaw clenched. "Nothing happened between us." "Of course not." The agreement dripped with sarcasm. "Just like nothing happened when you were photographed meeting with federal contacts. Just like those phones appeared in your room by magic." "You did this." The words came out flat, certain. Celeste laughed. Light, musical, genuine. "Me? I'm just Damien's girlfriend. I don't have the skills or resources to orchestrate something so elaborate." "You had help." "Even if I did, which I'm not saying I did, it wouldn't matter. The evidence exists. The recordings are real. Well, real enough. And Damien believes them, which is the only reality that counts in this house." Elara stood slowly, her body awkward with pregnancy weight, but her voice steady. "Why? What did I ever do to you? You existed." Celeste's mask slipped just slightly, showing the predator underneath. "You think I spent 3 years building my position here just to lose it to some pathetic little wife who got knocked up? You think I'm going to let motherhood turn you into a saint while I get pushed aside?" "He doesn't love me." "Not yet." Celeste rose from the chair, moving closer. "But babies change men, make them soft, make them think about legacy and family and all that bullshit that gets in the way of real power. I've seen it happen. Watched powerful men crumble because they started believing in redemption." She stood inches from Elara now, her voice dropping to a whisper. "So I removed the problem before it became one. And here's the beautiful part. Even if you somehow convince Damien you're innocent, even if you survive long enough to give birth, even if those babies are proven to be his, you've already lost. Because he looked at you tonight and believed you betrayed him. That mistrust doesn't go away. It's a cancer, and it will poison everything between you forever." Elara's hands trembled, but she held Celeste's gaze. "You're wrong." "We'll see." Celeste headed toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Elara, don't bother trying to convince anyone of your innocence. Lucian made sure the entire organization knows about your betrayal. The men who might have helped you, they think you're a rat, and in this world, rats die messy." The door clicked shut. Elara sank onto the bed, her breathing ragged, her mind racing through scenarios that all ended in blood. Then she felt it. A sharp kick from inside her belly, then another, hard enough to make her gasp. Her daughters. Fighting already. Something shifted in Elara's chest, something that felt less like fear and more like rage crystallizing into purpose. Celeste was right about one thing. She'd already lost everything, which meant she had nothing left to lose. That night, Elara began planning her survival with the kind of focus she'd never known she possessed. She couldn't fight Damien directly, couldn't overpower guards, couldn't walk out the front door. But she'd spent 3 years in this mansion learning its rhythms, its secrets, its weak points. The staff rotated shifts. Marco stood outside her door until midnight. Then Carlos took over until 8. Carlos was older, slower, sometimes fell asleep in his chair. The windows were barred, but the bathroom vent led to a small service shaft. Too narrow for most men, but possibly wide enough for a pregnant woman if she was desperate enough. The groundskeepers entered through a service gate at dawn that was often left unlocked for 15 minutes during shift change. None of it was enough alone. But combined, maybe, just maybe, there was a path. She needed help. Someone inside the organization who remembered her as something other than a traitor. Someone who owed her something. Elara pressed her hands against her belly, feeling her daughter shift and settle, and thought about a young soldier with kind eyes who'd helped her carry groceries. Nico Velez. 3 years ago, before Damien had married her, before she'd become furniture, Elara had still been a person. She'd had money, not much, but enough. Her grandmother had left her a small inheritance before the debts consumed everything. Jewelry, mostly. Antique pieces worth more for their age than their gems. She'd sold almost all of it to pay her father's debts. Almost. One piece she'd kept hidden, a ruby necklace worth maybe 10,000. Not enough to matter in Damien's world, but significant in hers. And then she'd met Nico in the mansion kitchen one afternoon, carrying bags from the market for the cook, looking exhausted and worried in a way that had nothing to do with his job. Elara had asked, gently, carefully, if he was okay. He told her about his sister, 19 years old, leukemia, no insurance, treatment she couldn't afford. Elara had sold the necklace the next day. She'd given him the cash in an envelope with no note, no explanation, no request for repayment, just because she could. Just because watching someone else's suffering when she had the power to stop it had felt wrong. Nico's sister had gotten her treatment, had gone into remission. And Nico had never forgotten. Now Elara just had to figure out how to reach him from inside a locked room under constant surveillance. Yeg. The answer came 5 days later in the form of laundry. Rosa, one of the housekeepers, arrived each morning to collect Elara's used linens and deliver fresh towels. She was in her 50s, had worked for the Vescari family for 20 years, and had the kind of face that revealed nothing. But Elara had seen Rosa cross herself once when she thought no one was looking, a small gesture of rebellion in a house that worshipped power instead of anything higher. On the 8th day of captivity, Elara wrote a note, short, desperate, hidden inside a pillowcase that Rosa would be collecting. Nico Velez. Tell him I need help. Tell him I saved his sister and now I need him to save my daughters. Please. She folded the paper into a tiny square and tucked it deep inside the pillowcase seam, then left it on the bed with her other laundry. When Rosa arrived, Elara watched her collect the linens with the same efficient movements as always. No acknowledgement, no sign she'd found anything unusual. Elara couldn't tell if the message had been discovered or ignored or lost. She could only wait. While Elara plotted survival, the organization around her began to fracture. She could feel it through the walls, raised voices echoing from distant rooms, footsteps moving faster than usual, tension crackling through the mansion like electricity before a storm. Something was wrong. It took 3 days for her to piece together what was happening from fragments of conversation she overheard when guards changed shifts. Damien's operation was bleeding. A weapons shipment had been intercepted by federal agents. The exact shipment supposedly compromised by Elara's betrayal. 2 of Damien's captains had been arrested. 3 more were under investigation. The rival families smelled blood in the water. And Lucien Moretti, the ambitious underboss, was positioning himself as the solution to problems he'd helped create. Elara heard it all through her door, through thin walls, through the way people moved when they thought no one was watching. Celeste had built a perfect trap. She'd fed Damien false evidence of betrayal, then ensured that real compromises happened, probably through Lucien, so the paranoia would seem justified. Now Damien was hemorrhaging power while suspecting his own wife, and Lucien was collecting loyalty from soldiers who wanted a leader who could protect them. It was brilliant. It was vicious. And Elara was the collateral damage. On the 11th night, someone knocked softly on her door at 3 a.m. Not Marco's usual bang, not Carlos's heavy rap, a gentle tap, tap, tap that could almost be mistaken for pipes settling. Elara climbed out of bed, her heart hammering, her body awkward with pregnancy weight. She pressed her ear against the door. "Who's there?" Silence. Then, "Rosa gave me your message." Nico's voice, barely above a whisper. Elara's knees nearly buckled with relief. "Oh, thank God." "Quiet. Marco's on break, but he'll be back in 10 minutes. Can you get me out?" "Not tonight. Too many eyes. But I'm working on it." A pause. "Are the babies really his?" The question hurt. "Yes." "He doesn't believe you." "I know. Everyone thinks you're a rat. If I help you and we're caught, they'll kill us both." "I'm already dead." Elara pressed her palm flat against the door, wishing she could see his face. He's planning to execute me after I give birth, take my daughters and raise them without me. If you don't help me, Nico, I'm dead anyway. At least this way I have a chance. She heard him breathing on the other side, calculating, weighing debt against risk. My sister's alive because of you. I didn't do it for payback. I did it because it was right. I know. His voice softened, which is why I'm going to help you even though it's insane. But you need to understand something. We get one shot at this. If we fail, Damien won't just kill you. He'll make it slow, painful. He'll make sure everyone sees what happens to traitors. I'm not a traitor. Doesn't matter. In this world, perception is reality. A pause. How far along are you? 6.5 months? So we have maybe 6 weeks before he pulls the trigger. Maybe less. He's paranoid. The longer I'm alive, the more I'm a liability. Then we move fast. She heard him shift position. I'm going to get you out, but you need to do exactly what I say when the time comes. No questions, no hesitation. You run when I tell you to run. What about you? I'll figure it out. Nico, your daughters deserve a chance. That's all that matters. Footsteps echoed from down the hall. Marco returning. I have to go. Be ready. Could be tomorrow, could be next week. When it happens, move fast. How will I know? You'll know. His footsteps faded away. Elara stood alone in the darkness, one hand on her belly, feeling her daughters kick and roll, and allowed herself the first small spark of hope she'd felt in weeks. 2 days later, Damien came to her room for the first time since her imprisonment. He arrived without warning. The door simply opened, and there he was, filling the frame with his presence, wearing the same cold expression he'd worn the night he'd sentenced her to death. Elara sat in the window seat, book forgotten in her lap, staring at the man she'd once tried to love. He looked different, thinner, harder, like something was eating him from the inside out. We need to talk. She didn't move. About what? You've already decided I'm guilty. Already planned my execution. What's left to discuss? Damien closed the door behind him and moved deeper into the room, studying her the way a scientist might examine a specimen. The shipment that got intercepted, the one you supposedly compromised, had details only 3 people knew. Me, Lucien, and Carlo. Not me. So you say. He stopped a few feet away, hands in his pockets, the picture of controlled violence. But the feds knew exactly where to look, exactly when to move. That information came from somewhere. Then maybe you should be questioning your underboss instead of locking up your pregnant wife. Something flickered across his face. Lucian's been with me for 8 years, and I've been with you for 3. Married to you, carrying your daughters. Which one of us has more reason to betray you? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He moved closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive, familiar, nauseating. Look at me. Elara lifted her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze with the kind of defiance she'd never shown before. Pregnancy had changed her. Impending death had changed her. She had nothing left to lose. Did you betray me? His voice dropped to something almost human, almost vulnerable. No. Then explain the recordings, the phones, the photographs. I can't explain them because I didn't create them. Someone did this to me, Damien, someone who wants you to believe I'm a traitor, someone who benefits from your paranoia. Celeste suggested, Celeste is manipulating you. The words came out hard, sharp. She's been poisoning you against me for months, spreading rumors, planting doubts, and you're so blinded by her legs and her mouth that you can't see she's the one destroying your organization from the inside. Damien's expression went arctic. Careful. Or what? You'll kill me? Elara laughed, bitter, broken. You're already planning to do that. What else can you threaten me with? More beatings? More isolation? You've already taken everything. I gave you everything. You gave me a cage. She stood, her body awkward with pregnancy weight, but her voice stronger than it had ever been. You gave me a mansion I couldn't leave, staff I couldn't trust, and a husband who looked through me like I was glass. The only thing you ever gave me that mattered was these babies, and now you're planning to steal them too. They stood facing each other across 3 feet of expensive carpet, two people who'd never truly known each other, united only by biology and legal documents. If they're mine, Damien said quietly, they stay with me. If they're not, they don't. They're yours. DNA test will prove it.
And what happens when it does? Elara stepped closer, one hand on her belly, her voice dropping to something dangerous. What happens when you realize you murdered an innocent woman and made your daughters grow up without their mother? What happens when they're old enough to ask questions and you have to explain you killed me because you trusted a manipulative mistress over your own wife? For the first time since she'd known him, Damien Vescari looked uncertain. I have to protect my organization. By destroying your family? You're not my family. You're a contract I honored because your father owed debts. The words should have hurt. Once they would have devastated her. Now they just felt true. Then honor the contract all the way, Elara's voice steadied. Let me give birth to your daughters. Get your DNA test. When it proves they're yours, let me leave. Let me disappear. You never have to see me again. Just let me live. And if you're a federal informant, then why would I be begging you to let me go instead of waiting for my FBI handlers to rescue me? The logic landed. She could see it in his eyes. Doubt. Real, genuine doubt. But then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and whatever human impulse had flickered to life died immediately. His expression went cold again. Get some rest. Doctor's coming tomorrow to check on the pregnancy. He left without another word, leaving Elara standing in the middle of her expensive cell, shaking with adrenaline and rage, and something that felt disturbingly like grief for a marriage that had never actually existed. Tammais. The doctor's visit revealed what Elara had been secretly fearing. Her blood pressure was elevated. Stress markers were concerning. The babies were healthy, but her body was struggling under the weight of constant terror. She needs to reduce anxiety, the doctor told Damien in the hallway outside her room, his voice carrying through the door Elara had pressed her ear against. This level of stress during late pregnancy can cause premature labor, placental complications, or worse. Define worse. Stillbirth. Maternal death. Pick your nightmare. Silence. Then Damien. What do you recommend? Honestly, whatever's causing this stress needs to stop. She's deteriorating. Another month like this and we're looking at a catastrophic outcome for everyone involved. More silence. When the doctor left, Damien didn't come back into her room, but an hour later, Celeste did. The mistress looked different this time, less polished, more agitated. Her makeup couldn't quite hide the shadows under her eyes, and her hands shook slightly as she lit a cigarette despite the no smoking signs. You're killing yourself, Celeste said without preamble. Elara stood at the window, watching guards patrol the gardens below. You're killing me. There's a difference. Semantics. Celeste took a long drag. The doctor's worried. Damien's worried. If those babies die because you can't handle the pressure, I can't handle being framed for treason and sentenced to death while pregnant. Elara turned slowly. Forgive me for not managing my stress better. Sarcasm doesn't suit you. Neither does prison, but here we are. Celeste studied her through cigarette smoke, those predator eyes calculating something Elara couldn't quite read. He's weakening. I can see it, starting to question whether you really betrayed him. Because I didn't. Doesn't matter. Celeste flicked ash into a decorative bowl. What matters is that doubt makes him vulnerable. And vulnerable men make mistakes. I can't have him going soft right when Lucien's positioning himself to take over. Elara's mind sharpened. Lucien's moving against Damien? Of course he is. That's what ambitious underbosses do. They wait for weakness, then strike. Celeste smiled coldly. The question is whether Damien's weak enough yet, whether losing you and potentially his daughters might break him completely. You want him broken. I want him manageable. There's a difference. She stubbed out her cigarette. Right now he's caught between believing I'm right about you and wondering if he's making the biggest mistake of his life. That indecision is dangerous for everyone. Then tell him the truth. What truth? Celeste's smile was poison. That I manufactured evidence to eliminate a threat? That's not truth. That's just one version of reality, and in Damien's world, the version that survives is the one backed by power, not morality. You're insane. I'm a survivor. Just like you're trying to be. Celeste moved toward the door. But here's the thing, Elara. You're surviving wrong. You're fighting him, making him doubt, forcing him to question his judgment. That makes you even more dangerous than if you just accepted your fate quietly. So I should just die?
You should disappear. Celeste's hand rested on the doorknob. Make it easy for everyone. Take whatever money you've hidden away, whatever escape plan you're cooking up, and vanish before you give birth. Raise those babies somewhere Damien can't find them, because if you stay, if you force a confrontation, people die. Probably starting with you. That's your solution? Run away pregnant and homeless? Better than running away dead. The door clicked shut. Elara stood frozen, her mind racing through the implications of what Celeste had just revealed without meaning to. Lucien was moving against Damien. Celeste knew about it, which meant Celeste and Lucien were working together, had probably been working together all along. The manufactured evidence, the intercepted shipment, the systematic destruction of Damien's organization. It wasn't about eliminating Elara. It was about eliminating Damien. She was just collateral damage in a coup. And if Damien fell, if Lucien took over, Elara's life wouldn't matter anyway. New boss. Same bullet. She pressed both hands against her belly, feeling her daughters move, and knew with absolute certainty that she was running out of time faster than she'd realized. Nico came for her 3 nights later. No warning, no signal. Just the sound of her door opening at 2 a.m. and his voice, urgent and low. Now. We move now. Elara was already dressed. She'd been sleeping in clothes for days, ready for exactly this moment. She grabbed the small bag she'd packed with essentials and followed him into the hallway. The guard post was empty.
Carlos?
She whispered. Sleeping. Drugged his coffee. Nico moved fast, checking corners, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. We have maybe 10 minutes before someone notices. Stay close. They moved through the mansion like ghosts, down the back stairs used by servants, through the kitchen where prep work for tomorrow's breakfast sat covered on counters, into the service corridor that led to the laundry room. Everything was going too smoothly. Elara's instincts screamed wrong. They reached the service exit, a plain metal door that opened onto the gardens where the groundskeeper's gate offered escape. Nico checked his watch. Shift change in 3 minutes. Gate'll be unlocked for exactly 90 seconds. We time this perfect, or we don't make it. How did you plan all this? Wasn't easy. Called in every favor I had. Promised things I shouldn't have promised. He met her eyes. Worth it. Nico, don't. Just be ready to run. He opened the door. Cold air hit Elara's face, carrying the smell of wet grass and freedom and possibility. They crossed the gardens at a careful jog, fast enough to move, slow enough not to draw attention from perimeter cameras. Elara's pregnant body protested every step, but adrenaline kept her moving. The groundskeeper's gate appeared ahead, wrought iron, 8 feet tall, currently closed but not locked. 30 seconds, 20, 10. Nico reached the gate first, pushed it open, and everything exploded into chaos. Floodlights ignited across the entire estate, turning night into day. Sirens wailed, and Damien Viscari stepped out of the shadows with 6 soldiers, guns drawn, his face a mask of fury, and something that looked disturbingly like pain. Going somewhere? Elara's blood turned to ice. It had been a trap. All of it. Nico's hand went to his gun, but 3 red dots appeared on his chest before he could draw. Don't. Damien's voice was death. You've done enough. Elara stepped forward, putting herself between Nico and the guns, her hands raised, her voice steady despite the terror flooding her veins. It was my idea. I begged him. He was just paying back a debt by helping my wife escape while she's pregnant with children that might not be mine. Damien moved closer, each step measured, controlled. That's not paying a debt. That's treason. They are yours. We'll know soon enough. He looked past her to Nico. Take him to the quarry. Make it hurt first. No! Elara lunged forward, but hands grabbed her, Luca and Santino, holding her back. Please, he didn't do anything wrong. He was just helping a federal informant escape. That's execution-level wrong in my organization. Soldiers moved forward, grabbing Nico, forcing him to his knees. Nico didn't fight, just looked at Elara with tired, sad eyes. Take care of your girls. Get him out of my sight, Damien ordered. They dragged Nico away into the darkness. Elara thrashed against her captors, screaming, begging, but the hands holding her were iron. When the struggling finally exhausted her, she sagged in their grip, panting, tears streaming down her face. Damien stood 3 feet away, studying her like she was a particularly complicated problem. "You really thought you could run? I really thought you'd kill me." Her voice came out broken. "What was I supposed to do?" "Accept your fate." "My fate is being murdered for a crime I didn't commit." "Your fate is whatever I decide it is." The words hung in the air between them, ugly, true, final. Then Damien's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His expression shifted, something dark and terrible crossing his features. "Take her to the quarry, too." Elara's world tilted. "What? You wanted to run with him? Fine. Die with him." Damien's voice was empty. "The babies will be delivered by C-section tonight. You won't be awake for it. And you won't wake up after. You can't. Watch me." He turned and walked away, leaving Elara screaming his name into the darkness while soldiers forced her toward a black SUV that would carry her to her grave. Inside her belly, her daughters kicked frantically, sensing their mother's terror, fighting a battle they were too young to understand but already too involved to escape. And somewhere in the mansion behind her, Celeste Arden watched from a window with a smile that would have made demons proud, her plan finally reaching its bloody conclusion. The SUV's interior smelled like leather and gun oil, and the sweat of men who'd driven this route before with cargo that never came back. Elara sat wedged between Luca and Santino in the back seat, zip-tied wrists pressed against her pregnant belly, feeling her daughters kick frantically inside her like they understood what was coming better than she wanted to admit. Rain hammered against the windshield in sheets that turned the world beyond the glass into abstract violence. The driver, Marco, the same guard who'd stood outside her door for weeks, navigated through darkness with the practiced ease of someone who'd made this trip too many times. In the front passenger seat sat Matteo, one of Damien's enforcers, a man with prison tattoos and dead eyes who whistled tunelessly while checking his phone. Nobody spoke. There was nothing left to say. Elara's mind raced through scenarios that all ended in blood. She was 6.5 months pregnant. Her body was slow, awkward, vulnerable. Even if she somehow got free of the zip ties, even if she somehow overpowered 4 armed men, even if she somehow escaped into the forest in the middle of a rainstorm, where would she go? How far could she run before labor started, or hypothermia set in, or Damien's network found her? Her daughters moved again, sharp jabs against her ribs that felt almost like protest. "I'm sorry," she whispered, too quiet for the men to hear over the rain. "I tried." The words tasted like failure. The SUV turned off the main highway onto a dirt road that wound through dense forest. Branches scraped against the windows like skeletal fingers. The headlights cut through rain and darkness, illuminating nothing but more trees, more mud, more emptiness. After 20 minutes, the road ended at a clearing. The quarry. Elara had heard whispers about this place during her 3 years in the mansion. Fragments of conversation between soldiers, rumors about where problems got solved permanently. She'd never wanted to believe it was real, never wanted to imagine the cold practicality of men who needed a place to make bodies disappear. Now she was staring at it through rain-streaked glass. A massive pit gouged from the earth, filled with black water that reflected nothing. Abandoned equipment rusting at the edges. No witnesses. No cameras. No one who'd ask questions about gunshots in the middle of nowhere. Marco killed the engine. The sudden silence was worse than noise. "Out." Matteo's voice was flat, bored. They dragged her from the SUV into rain that immediately soaked through her clothes. Her feet slipped in mud. Her pregnant body lurched forward, but Luca caught her roughly, keeping her upright, his grip hard enough to leave bruises she wouldn't live long enough to see fade. Headlights from a second vehicle appeared through the trees. Another SUV pulled into the clearing, doors opening, soldiers emerging with a figure slumped between them. Nico. They'd already beaten him. Blood streamed from his nose and mouth, mixing with rain, one eye swollen shut. He could barely stand, but when he saw Elara, something in his expression sharpened. Recognition, regret, determination. "I told you," Matteo said to no one in particular. "Traitors always travel in pairs." They forced both of them to the quarry's edge where the ground dropped away into nothing. Elara could hear water lapping against rocks far below, patient and hungry. Matteo pulled his gun, a service pistol that looked almost casual in his grip. He checked the magazine with the kind of muscle memory that came from years of this specific work. "Any last words?" "She's innocent." Nico's voice came out thick with blood. "The evidence against her is fake. Celeste and Lucien manufactured everything. They're planning a coup. This is all part of—" Matteo shot him, not in the head, in the stomach. The sound cracked through the rain like thunder, and Nico collapsed, hands pressed against his gut, gasping, his face gone white with shock and agony. Elara screamed, a raw animal sound that tore from her throat before conscious thought could stop it. "That's for talking too much." Matteo turned the gun on Elara. "Your turn. Unless you've got something better to say than conspiracy theories." Elara's mind went blank with terror. She couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except stare at the black hole of the gun barrel pointed at her forehead, while her daughters kicked inside her belly like they were trying to fight their way out. Then headlights flooded the clearing again. A third vehicle. Damien's personal Mercedes, black, armored, expensive enough to buy a house. The SUV stopped 20 feet away. The engine idled. Nobody got out. Elara could see his silhouette through the tinted windshield, watching, waiting, making sure the job got done. Her husband, her executioner. Something inside her broke. Not her spirit, that had broken weeks ago. Something deeper. Something fundamental about who she'd been before all this. The last remaining piece of the girl who'd believed marriage could be survived, who'd thought love might grow from obligation, who'd tried to make herself small enough to stay safe. That girl died in the mud at the edge of a quarry while rain washed away any evidence she'd ever existed. What remained was something rawer, angrier, more dangerous. "Do it then," Elara said, her voice steady despite the terror flooding her veins. She met Matteo's eyes without flinching. "Shoot a pregnant woman in front of your boss. Show him exactly what kind of man he's become. Show him the legacy he's building for his daughters, if they survive long enough to ask about their mother." Matteo hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. "You think I'm a traitor?" Elara's voice grew stronger. "You think I betrayed the organization? Then why did I try to run instead of calling my FBI handlers? Where's my protection? Where's my deal? If I was really an informant, I'd be in witness protection right now, not standing in the mud waiting to die." "Boss says you're guilty." "Boss is being manipulated by his mistress and his underboss who are planning to take everything from him." The words exploded out of her. "Celeste manufactured evidence. Lucien's feeding information to the feds. They're destroying Damien's empire piece by piece and using me as the scapegoat. And you're all too blind or too loyal or too stupid to see it. Shut up." "I'm carrying his daughters." She stepped toward Matteo despite the gun, despite everything. His blood, his heirs. "And you're about to execute them because some cocaine-addicted mistress whispered the right lies in the right ears. What happens when the DNA test proves they're his? What happens when he realizes he murdered his own children?" The gun wavered. Behind them, Nico made a wet gasping sound, still alive, barely, bleeding out in the mud. The Mercedes door opened. Damien stepped out into the rain. He wore the same suit from earlier, now soaked, clinging to his frame, ruined by weather and darkness. His hair hung in his eyes. His expression was carved from stone. He walked toward them with measured steps, each footfall deliberate, until he stood 3 feet from Elara with the kind of presence that made even armed men step back. For a long moment he just stared at her, really looked at her, not through her, not past her, at her. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly. "I already did. You didn't believe me. Tell me again." Elara's hands trembled against her belly. "I never betrayed you. I never spoke to federal agents. I never compromised your operations. Someone set me up. Someone who wanted you to doubt me, hate me, get rid of me. And it worked. You're standing here in the rain about to murder your wife and daughters because you trusted the wrong people." "Who?" "Celeste, Lucien, probably others." She met his eyes, refusing to look away. "They're planning a coup, Damien. They're dismantling your organization from the inside while you're distracted hunting ghosts. And when you finally realize what's happening, it'll be too late." Damien's jaw tightened. Lucien's been with me for 8 years. And how many of those years was he waiting for a chance to take your place? Celeste loves me. Celeste loves power. There's a difference. Rain hammered down around them, turning the quarry into a scene from nightmares. Darkness and mud and men with guns and a pregnant woman fighting for survival with nothing but words. Damien pulled out his phone with slow, deliberate movements, dialed, put it on speaker. It rang 3 times before Celeste answered, her voice sleepy and warm. "Baby, it's late. Is everything okay?" "Where are you?" Damien's tone revealed nothing. "In bed." "Where else would I be at 3 in the morning?" A pause. "Did something happen with the traitor?" "Not yet. I need you to do something for me. Anything. Go to my study, top left drawer of my desk. There's a file marked Vesuvius. Bring it to me at the quarry." Silence on the other end, long enough to be noticeable. "The quarry? Damien, what's going on?" "Just bring the file. Now. It's pouring rain." "Now, Celeste." Another pause, then, "Okay. Give me 20 minutes." The line went dead. Damien pocketed his phone, his expression unreadable. Vesuvius is a contingency operation. Details about moving the entire organization offshore if federal heat gets too intense. Only 3 people know that file exists. Me, Lucien, and Carlo. Elara's heart hammered. "Then how would I know about it?" "You wouldn't, unless you were actually the informant." He turned to Matteo. "Get Lucien on the phone. Tell him I need him here immediately. Security emergency." Matteo made the call while Elara stood shivering in the rain, trying to understand what game Damien was playing. Beside her, Nico's breathing had gone shallow and raspy. He was dying. Minutes, maybe. Not hours. 10 minutes later, Lucien's BMW appeared through the trees. The underboss emerged looking perfectly composed despite the hour and weather. Expensive raincoat, polished shoes, the kind of man who never let circumstances ruffle him. "Boss, what's the emergency?" "Elara claims you're planning a coup, says you and Celeste manufactured evidence against her." Lucien's expression didn't flicker. "That's insane. She's desperate, saying anything to save herself." "Probably." Damien's voice remained flat. "Where were you 3 hours ago?" "Home? Asleep? Alone?" "My wife was there." "Can she confirm that?" Lucien's eyes narrowed. "What are you really asking?" "Just answer the question." "She was asleep. I was in my study working." "Why?" Before Damien could respond, Celeste's Mercedes appeared, the car he'd given her last year, sleek and silver even in the rain. She parked beside the other vehicles and stepped out carrying a manila folder, wearing designer rain boots, and an expression of confused concern that would have convinced anyone who didn't know better. "I brought the file." She handed it to Damien, then noticed Elara and Nico. Her eyes widened. "Oh God, is this... Are you..." "Open it," Damien told her. "What?" "The file. Open it." Celeste's hands trembled slightly as she took the folder back and opened it. Her face went white. Inside were photographs, not of operation details, of Celeste and Lucien. Meeting in hotel rooms, kissing in parking garages, exchanging envelopes in restaurants, dated over the past 6 months. "Damien!" Celeste's voice came out strangled. "This isn't what it looks like." "Really?" Damien's voice was death. "Because it looks like my mistress has been fucking my underboss while planning to destroy me. I've had you both followed for 3 months. Damien pulled out his phone again, scrolling through something. Ever since small details started leaking. Ever since shipments kept getting compromised. I thought it was Elara at first. Then I thought it was coincidence. Then I thought maybe I was paranoid." He showed them the phone screen, surveillance photos, bank transactions, recorded phone calls. "You've been selling information to the Calabrese family, setting up a deal where they eliminate me, Lucien takes over, and you become the queen of the new regime. How am I doing so far?" Lucien's hand moved toward his jacket. 6 guns materialized, all pointed at him. "Don't," Damien said softly. "You'll be dead before you touch it." Lucien's hand stopped. His expression shifted from composed to calculating, a predator reassessing the odds. Celeste, meanwhile, had started crying, perfect tears rolling down perfect cheeks. "Baby, please. I made mistakes. I got scared. You were so distant, so cold. Lucian paid attention to me, made me feel wanted. It didn't mean anything. You framed my wife for treason. Damien's voice never rose. Didn't need to. Manufactured evidence, faked recordings, planted phones, convinced me to execute a pregnant woman who never did anything except try to survive in a house that hated her. She was in the way. Of what? Your plan to steal my empire? He looked at Lucian. Was it her idea or yours? Lucian's mask finally cracked. His smile turned vicious. Does it matter? You were weak, Damien, getting soft, thinking about legitimacy and family and all that bullshit that gets men killed in this business. We were saving the organization by removing you before you destroyed it, by destroying it yourselves, by rebuilding it stronger, without the liability of a boss who's forgotten what power actually costs. Damien stared at his underboss for a long moment. Then he turned to Elara, who stood frozen in the rain, trying to process that she'd been right, that she'd been innocent all along, that everything she'd suffered had been orchestrated by two people playing games with lives. I'm sorry, Damien said. The words hung in the air like something alien. Elara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the apology coming from a man who'd spent months treating her like garbage before sentencing her to death. That doesn't fix anything, she finally managed. Sorry doesn't undo the beatings or the imprisonment or standing here in the rain waiting to be executed while pregnant with your daughters. I know. Sorry doesn't bring back Nico. She looked at the young soldier bleeding out in the mud, his breathing barely visible now. He tried to save me because I saved his sister, because he remembered kindness when everyone else forgot what it looked like, and you shot him for it. I know. So what now? Elara's voice cracked. You've got your traitors. You've got your revenge. What happens to me? Damien didn't answer immediately. He looked at Celeste and Lucien, then at his soldiers, then at the quarry behind them, that black water waiting patiently for bodies it would never have to give back. Take them to the edge, he said quietly. Elara's blood went cold. What? Not you. Damien's eyes met hers. Them. Understanding crashed through the clearing like a physical force. Celeste started screaming. No, Damien, please, I love you. It was all Lucian's idea. I was just lying. Like you've been lying for months. Damien's voice remained terrifyingly calm. Like you lied about Elara. Like you probably lied about loving me. Soldiers grabbed Celeste and Lucien, dragging them toward the quarry's edge. Lucien fought, actually fought, throwing elbows, trying to break free. It took 3 men to control him. Celeste just collapsed, sobbing, begging, her designer clothes covered in mud and rain and the reality of consequences. Any last words? Damien asked, echoing Mateo's earlier question. Lucien spat blood. You're weaker than I thought. Letting a woman manipulate you into... Damien shot him. 1 bullet. Center mass. Clean. Lucien fell backward into the quarry, his body disappearing into black water with barely a splash. Celeste's screaming reached a pitch that barely sounded human. Please, Damien, baby, I'll do anything. I'll tell you everything. I'll testify. You already told me everything that matters. He raised the gun. Elara turned away, pressing her hands over her ears, but she couldn't block out the sound of the gunshot or the splash that followed or the sudden silence that settled over the quarry like a blanket made of guilt. When she finally looked back, Damien stood alone at the edge, staring down at water that had already gone still. Get Nico medical attention, he said without turning around. Now. Soldiers rushed forward, carefully lifting the wounded man, carrying him toward the Mercedes with the kind of urgency that suggested maybe he'd survive if they moved fast enough. Then Damien turned to face Elara. Rain ran down his face like tears, except he wasn't crying. His expression was empty, hollowed out, like he'd just killed something inside himself along with Celeste and Lucien. I was wrong, he said, about everything, about you. Elara stood 3 feet away, trembling, soaked, exhausted, carrying his daughters inside a body that had been through more trauma than any pregnant woman should survive. That doesn't make us even. I know. That doesn't make this okay. I know. That doesn't make you anything except a man who murdered people in front of his pregnant wife. Her voice finally broke. Tears mixed with rain on her face. Months of fear and pain and rage came pouring out in great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Damien didn't move to comfort her, didn't reach out, didn't do anything except stand there and take it. "What do you want?" he asked quietly when her crying finally subsided into exhausted silence. What would make any of this even slightly less horrible? Elara looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the monster she'd been living with, but the man underneath, broken, guilty, dangerous, human. "I want to leave." "Okay." "I want money, enough to disappear, enough to raise our daughters somewhere you'll never find us." "Okay." "I want you to stay away from us forever. No visits, no calls. No trying to be a father when you couldn't even be a decent husband." He flinched like she'd hit him. "Okay. And I want—" She trailed off, her hands moving to her belly where her daughters kicked restlessly. "I want you to know that they'll grow up asking about you, and I'll have to decide whether to tell them the truth about what kind of man their father was or lie to protect them from nightmares." "Tell them the truth." Damien's voice was barely above a whisper. "They deserve that much." He turned toward the Mercedes, then stopped. "There's the account in your name. Offshore. 15 million. Password is your mother's maiden name and your birth year. Use it. Disappear. Be safe." "When did you—" 3 months ago. When I first started suspecting something was wrong." He looked back at her, his expression unreadable in the rain and darkness. "I thought if you were innocent and something happened to me, you'd need a way out. Turns out you needed it because of me instead." He got in the Mercedes and drove away, leaving Elara standing alone in the mud beside a quarry that had just swallowed 2 people, wondering if she'd actually survived or just traded one nightmare for another. The remaining soldiers waited silently, unclear on what to do with a woman who was both victim and boss's wife and mother of his heirs. Luca finally stepped forward, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. "Ma'am, we should get you out of the rain, get you checked by the doctor." Elara looked at the quarry one last time, that black water hiding bodies and secrets and the wreckage of a marriage that had never really existed. Then she let them lead her back to the SUV, back toward the mansion, back toward a life she no longer recognized and wasn't sure she wanted. But for the first time in months, nobody was trying to kill her. And her daughters were still kicking. And $15 million could buy a lot of distance from a man who'd almost destroyed everything. She pressed her hands against her belly and whispered in the darkness, "We're going to survive this. I promise. We're going to survive." The words felt less like a lie than they had before. But the night was far from over. The mansion felt different when Elara walked through its doors at dawn. Same marble floors, same vaulted ceilings, same obscene wealth dripping from every surface. But the air had changed, thinner, colder, charged with the kind of tension that preceded either collapse or explosion. The staff moved through hallways with their heads down, whispering. Soldiers clustered in corners, their conversations dying the moment she passed. Everyone knew something had happened at the quarry. Nobody knew exactly what, but the absence of Celeste and Lucien spoke louder than any official announcement. The doctor examined Elara in the same guest room where she'd been imprisoned for weeks. Her blood pressure was dangerously elevated. Her stress markers were catastrophic. The twins showed signs of distress, accelerated heart rates, reduced movement, the kind of warning signs that preceded emergency C-sections and neonatal ICU stays. "You need complete bed rest," the doctor said, packing his equipment with hands that trembled slightly. "No stress, no excitement, no—" He gestured vaguely at the world beyond the door. "Whatever's been happening needs to stop immediately, or we're looking at premature labor, possibly within days." "How early are we talking?" 28 weeks if it happens now. Survivable, but risky. Every day you can keep them inside matters. Every week exponentially more." Elara pressed her hands against her belly, feeling her daughters shift restlessly. "What are their chances if I go into labor today?" 70%, maybe 75. He met her eyes. "But that's survival. Lung development, brain development, long-term complications. Those are different conversations." "And if I make it to 32 weeks?" 90% survival, significantly better outcomes." He closed his medical bag with a decisive snap. 4 weeks, Mrs. Viscari. Keep them inside for 4 more weeks, and they'll have a real shot at healthy lives." After he left, Elara sat alone in the expensive silence, doing math that tasted like poison. 4 weeks meant staying in this mansion. 4 weeks meant being near Damien. 4 weeks meant postponing her escape, her freedom, her chance to disappear into the $15 million waiting in an offshore account. But 4 weeks also meant her daughters might survive without ventilators and feeding tubes and the kind of medical trauma that shaped entire childhoods. Her hands moved in slow circles over her belly, feeling the girls respond to her touch. Tiny kicks and rolls that felt like conversation in a language she was only beginning to understand. 4 weeks, she whispered. We can do 4 weeks. The words felt like a prayer, except she didn't know who she was praying to anymore. Fuck. Damien found her that afternoon. She'd moved to the library, a room she'd always loved despite everything else. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens where spring flowers were starting to bloom. She sat in the window seat with a book she wasn't reading, watching rain clouds gather on the horizon. He knocked on the open door frame like he needed permission to enter his own house. Can I come in? Elara didn't look at him. It's your mansion. That's not an answer. She finally turned, studying the man who'd almost killed her 12 hours ago. He looked worse than she'd ever seen him. Hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled, shadows under his eyes that spoke of zero sleep and too many thoughts. Come in. Don't come in. I don't care anymore. He entered slowly, moving like someone walking through a minefield. He sat in the leather chair across from her window seat, maintaining distance, keeping his hands visible like he was approaching a wounded animal. The doctor says you need rest. The doctor says a lot of things. 4 weeks until it's safer to deliver. I can count. Silence stretched between them, not comfortable but not actively hostile, just exhausted. I've contacted my lawyers, Damien said finally. Started the process of transferring full custody to you. Legal documents, financial arrangements, everything you'll need to disappear completely. What's the catch? No catch. You were right. About everything. I don't deserve to be their father. Elara's laugh came out bitter. Now you develop self-awareness? After months of torture? Better late than never? That's not funny. I know. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. I've been running an empire for 10 years. Built it from nothing. Turned my family's small operation into something that controls half the East Coast. You know how many people have tried to betray me? Dozens. How many succeeded? None. Until Celeste and Lucien. Why are you telling me this? Because I was so focused on external threats, I missed the ones closest to me. So paranoid about enemies, I turned my wife into one. His voice dropped. I don't know how to fix that. I don't even know if it can be fixed, but I need you to know I see it now. I see what I did. Congratulations. You've achieved basic human awareness. Elara set down her book. What do you want, Damien? An apology? Forgiveness? Some kind of redemption arc that makes you feel better about almost murdering your pregnant wife? I want you to be safe. Then stay away from me. I am. I will. After the babies are born. He stood, moving toward the door. But right now, staying away means leaving you vulnerable. The organization knows about the coup, knows Lucien and Celeste are gone. That creates a power vacuum, and power vacuums attract predators. Elara's stomach clenched. What kind of predators? The kind who know I have pregnant wife carrying my heirs. The kind who'd see kidnapping or killing you as the perfect way to destabilize my operation. He paused at the threshold. So until you deliver and disappear, you're the most valuable target in the city. And I'm the only thing standing between you and people who'd make what I did look like mercy. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to make you understand reality. He met her eyes. 4 weeks, Elara. Let me keep you alive for 4 weeks. Then you never have to see me again. He left before she could respond. Elara sat in the window seat, watching storm clouds roll closer, feeling her daughters kick anxiously inside her belly, and realized with cold certainty that the nightmare wasn't over. It was just changing shape. The first attack came 3 days later. Elara was in the gardens, doctor's orders to get mild exercise, walk slowly, keep her blood pressure manageable. 2 guards flanked her. The afternoon sun felt warm on her face. Everything seemed almost normal. Then the shooting started. It came from everywhere at once. Automatic weapons fire tearing through hedges and flower beds, bullets punching into marble fountains and stone pathways. The guards threw themselves over Elara, forcing her to the ground, their bodies covering hers while chaos exploded around them. She couldn't breathe. The weight of two full-grown men pressed against her pregnant belly, while her daughters kicked frantically, and gunfire turned the peaceful gardens into a war zone. Someone screamed. One of the guards jerked, then went still. Blood soaked through his shirt onto Elara's arm. The second guard, Luca, dragged her toward the house, firing blindly behind them while she stumbled forward, her pregnant body slow and awkward and completely useless. They made it to the conservatory doors. Luca shoved her inside and slammed the glass closed just as more bullets shattered the panels above them. "Stay down!" He reloaded with shaking hands. "Backup's coming!" The glass exploded inward. 3 men in black tactical gear poured through the opening. Professional, efficient. Not Damien's people. Luca killed one before the other 2 shot him, double tap to the chest, textbook execution. He fell backward, eyes still open, surprise frozen on his face. Elara scrambled backward, hands instinctively protecting her belly, while the 2 remaining attackers advanced with weapons trained on her center mass. "Don't move!" The first one's voice was flat. American accent. Ex-military, probably. "You're worth more alive, but we've got flexibility." "Who are you?" "Does it matter?" He pulled out zip ties. "Calabrese family sends their regards." The rival organization, the one Lucien and Celeste had been negotiating with. Elara's mind raced. "They're dead. Lucien and Celeste. The deal's off." "Deal's never off, just new management." He moved closer. "You're the leverage now. Vescari gives us territory, or we send you back piece by piece, starting with those babies." Then the conservatory doors exploded open and Damien appeared with 6 soldiers, guns drawn, his face carved from murder. "Wrong house." The firefight lasted maybe 10 seconds. Elara couldn't track it, just muzzle flashes and blood spray and bodies dropping. When silence finally settled, both attackers were dead and Damien stood in the middle of the carnage breathing hard, his shirt splattered with other people's blood. He crossed to Elara in 3 strides, hands checking her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "No, the baby's... We're getting the doctor. Now." He lifted her easily despite her pregnancy weight, carrying her out of the conservatory like she weighed nothing. "Marco, clear the medical wing. Get everyone out except essential staff." They moved through hallways that had turned into armed camps, soldiers at every corner, weapons drawn, the entire mansion on lockdown. Staff huddled in rooms with locked doors while Damien's men swept for additional threats. The doctor arrived within minutes, setting up in the medical suite while Elara lay on an examination table trying not to scream as contractions rippled through her belly. "Not labor," the doctor said after checking. "Stress contractions. Braxton Hicks, but they're close to the real thing. If this continues..." "Make it stop." Damien's voice was steel. "Whatever it takes. I can give her something to relax the uterus, but Mr. Vescari, she needs 0 stress, 0 excitement. This..." He gestured at the chaos beyond the door. "This is the opposite of what she needs. Then I'll eliminate the threats." "You can't eliminate biology. Her body is preparing to deliver whether we're ready or not." The doctor prepared an injection. "This buys us maybe a week, maybe less. After that, anything could trigger labor. A loud noise, a sudden movement, more violence." He administered the shot, and Elara felt the contractions gradually ease, her belly softening, her daughters settling. But the fear remained. "How many more attacks?" she asked Damien when the doctor left. "As many as it takes to get to you." He stood at the window, staring out at gardens where bodies were being removed. "The Calabrese family thinks you're their ticket to my territory. They won't stop." "Then let them have it. Give them whatever they want." "That's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" Her voice cracked. "How many people have to die because I exist?" Damien turned slowly. "As many as necessary." The second attack came that night. A car bomb in the front courtyard, massive, devastating, meant to draw security to one location while a second team breached the east wing. Elara woke to explosions and gunfire. Damien was already there, dragging her from bed, wrapping her in a bulletproof vest that barely fit over her pregnant belly. "We're moving you. Safe house across the city." "I can barely walk." "Then I'll carry you." They moved through secret passageways Elara didn't know existed, behind bookcases and false walls, passages built by Damien's grandfather when paranoia was the family business. The sounds of fighting echoed from above, men shouting, glass breaking, automatic weapons turning the mansion into a battlefield. Damien got her to the garage where an armored SUV waited. He shoved her into the back seat and climbed behind the wheel. The garage door exploded inward just as he started the engine. Two motorcycles roared through, riders armed with SMGs firing at the SUV's reinforced glass. The bullets couldn't penetrate, but the sound was deafening. Damien floored the accelerator. The SUV smashed through the garage's back wall. Not designed for it, but the vehicle was heavy enough and fast enough to punch through drywall and wood framing. They burst into the side yard, tires chewing through landscaping, heading for the service road. The motorcycles followed. More gunfire. The back window spiderwebbed but held. Elara pressed herself into the floorboards, hands over her belly, feeling her daughter's kick in protest against the noise and chaos. Damien took a corner hard enough to throw her against the door. "Stay down!" "Where are we going?" "Anywhere but here." One of the motorcycles pulled alongside. The rider aimed directly at Damien through the driver's window. Damien slammed the SUV sideways, crushing the motorcycle against a brick wall. The rider flew 20 feet before hitting pavement. The second bike tried to flank from the other side. Damien hit the brakes hard. The bike shot past them. He accelerated again, ramming the motorcycle from behind, sending the rider tumbling across the road in a spray of sparks and blood. Silence settled over the SUV except for Elara's ragged breathing and the engine's steady growl. They drove for 20 minutes before Damien was satisfied they weren't being followed. He pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a building Elara didn't recognize, concrete and shadows, and the kind of place that asked no questions. He helped her out of the SUV, his hands gentler than they'd been in months. "Can you walk?" "I don't know." Her legs trembled. Her entire body felt like it had been through a war. But her daughters were still moving inside her, angry kicks that felt almost accusatory. Damien half-carried her to an elevator that required a key card and a code. They rode up in silence, his arm around her waist, supporting her weight. The apartment was utilitarian, furniture that came with the lease, generic art on walls, nothing personal. A safe house. One of many, probably. Damien settled Elara on the couch and immediately started checking windows, exits, security measures. "How long do we stay here?" "Until I fix this." "And how do you fix this?" He didn't answer immediately, just stood at the window, staring out at the city lights, his profile hard and tired, and something else Elara couldn't quite name. "The Calabrese family wants territory. They're willing to start a war to get it." He turned to face her. "So I give them a war, fast and brutal and decisive enough that nobody else gets ideas about exploiting weakness. You're going to kill them, all of them. Anyone connected to the attacks, anyone who knew about them, anyone who might have heard rumors and decided not to warn me." His voice was flat, empty. "I'm going to burn their entire organization to the ground and salt the earth so nothing grows back." Elara stared at the man she'd married, really looked at him for the first time in months, and saw exactly what he was. Not a husband, not a father. A killer who'd briefly pretended to be human. "What happens to me while you're burning cities?" "You stay here, protected, 24-hour security, doctor on call, everything you need. A cage by another name. A cage that keeps you alive. For 4 more weeks, then what?" "Then you disappear like we agreed." He moved to the door. "I have work to do. Marco will be outside. Don't open the door for anyone except me or the doctor." "Damien." He paused, hand on the doorknob, not looking back. "They're your daughters too. Don't you want to meet them? Hold them? Be part of their lives?" His shoulders tensed. "I gave up that right at the quarry. They're babies. They don't know about rights or mistakes or what their father almost did to their mother. They just know they exist. And they'll have a better life never knowing me." He left before she could argue. Elara sat alone in the generic safe house, hands on her belly, feeling her daughters move like they were arguing with each other about which one got more room. Outside, the city glittered indifferently, while somewhere in its shadows, a war was about to start. And she was the reason for all of it. 3 days passed in suffocating isolation. Marco brought meals.
The doctor checked on her daily. Her contractions had stopped, but her blood pressure remained dangerously high. The twins were growing restless, constant movement, like they were running out of space and patience in equal measure. Elara had no phone, no computer, no connection to the outside world, except the television that showed news reports about a sudden spike in mob violence across the city. 5 Calabrese captains dead in coordinated hits. Their headquarters burned to the ground. Street soldiers disappearing. The news called it a gang war. Speculation about FBI involvement. Theories about internal power struggles. Elara knew better. She was watching Damien dismantle an entire criminal organization as payment for daring to threaten his unborn daughters. On the 4th night, he finally returned. He looked like he'd been to hell, blood on his shirt cuffs, exhaustion carved into his face, something dark and terrible in his eyes that hadn't been there before. It's done. He collapsed into the chair across from her. The Calabrese family no longer exists. Their allies have been warned. Everyone who knew about the attacks is dead. How many? Don't ask questions you don't want answered. How many people died because of me? None of them died because of you. His voice was flat. They died because they thought pregnant women were acceptable targets. They died because they forgot what happens when you threaten a Viscari. You're covered in blood. Most of it's not mine. They sat in silence while city lights painted shadows across the walls, and Elara tried to reconcile the man across from her with the boy he must have been once, before violence became his first language. You should clean up, she said finally. I should leave. You don't need to see me like this. I've seen you worse. I've seen you beat me with a belt in front of your entire organization. Blood is almost an improvement. Something that might have been shame crossed his face. I'll never apologize enough for that. Then stop apologizing and just... She gestured helplessly. Just do better. Be better. If not for me, then for those girls. I told you, they're better off without me. And I'm telling you, they deserve a father who tries. Her voice strengthened. Not a perfect father. Not even a good father. Just one who shows up and does his best not to fuck them up worse than genetics already will. My best almost killed you. Your worst almost killed me. Your best hasn't shown up yet. Damien stared at her like she was speaking a language he didn't understand. Why aren't you angrier? Oh, I'm furious. Elara leaned back against the couch cushions, one hand moving in circles over her belly. I'm so angry I can barely breathe sometimes. But I'm also exhausted and pregnant and running out of energy to hate you when I need everything I have left to keep these girls safe. I don't deserve forgiveness. Good thing I'm not offering it. Her daughters kicked hard enough to make her wince. I'm offering a chance. One chance to be present for their birth, to hold them once, to look them in the eyes and decide if you can actually be what they need or if you're going to walk away and send money from a distance while they grow up with a father-shaped hole in their lives. And if I walk away, then you walk away. But you don't get to pretend it was noble or necessary. You'll have to live with the fact that you chose to abandon them, actively, deliberately. She met his eyes. Can you live with that? The question hung in the air between them, heavy, loaded, impossible. Damien stood slowly. I need to think. You have 2 weeks. That's when the doctor wants to schedule the C-section. Show up or don't, but decide. He nodded once and left. Elara sat alone in the silence, feeling her daughters settle, as if they'd been listening to the entire conversation and had opinions about their father's choices. He's an idiot, she whispered to them. But he's your idiot, and if he can figure out how to be even marginally functional, maybe you'll get lucky. Her belly rippled with movement that felt almost like agreement. Outside, the city slept while a criminal empire rebuilt itself from ashes, and a man who'd spent his life choosing power over everything else stood at a crossroads he'd never expected to face. And somewhere in the darkness, the final pieces of a much larger game were sliding into position. Because wars have consequences. And the Calabrese family had allies who didn't forgive, allies who were already planning their revenge, allies who understood that the best way to destroy Damien Viscari wasn't through his organization, it was through his daughters. The C-section was scheduled for Wednesday morning at a private medical facility Damien owned through shell corporations. Sterile white rooms and doctors who asked no questions, and security that could stop a small army. Tuesday night, Elara couldn't sleep.
She lay in the safe house bedroom, hands pressed against her belly, where her daughters had finally gone still after months of constant movement. They dropped lower in recent days, settling into position, preparing for a birth that would come by scalpel instead of nature. She wondered if they knew. If somehow, in that mysterious space between consciousness and instinct, they understood that tomorrow everything would change, that the warm darkness they'd known their entire existence would split open to reveal light and cold and a world that had already tried to kill them before they'd even taken their first breath. Marco knocked softly on the door at 2 a.m. "Mrs. Viscari? You should see this." She found him in the living room, television volume low, news channel showing shaky cell phone footage of a building engulfed in flames. The medical facility? Burning. "When?" Elara's voice came out strangled. 20 minutes ago. Explosion in the basement. Entire structures compromised." Marco's hand rested on his weapon. "Boss is already moving you to the backup location. Doctor will meet us there." "Who did this?" "Same people who've been trying to kill you for 2 weeks." He helped her into a bulletproof vest that barely closed over her pregnant belly. "Remnants of the Calabrese family, allies from Chicago. They want the boss to suffer before they finish him." The drive through pre-dawn darkness felt like descending into hell for the 3rd or 4th time. Elara had lost count of how many times she'd run for her life in recent months. The backup facility was 40 minutes outside the city, hidden in industrial wasteland where abandoned factories provided cover and isolation. Damien met them at the entrance, flanked by a dozen soldiers, his expression carved from murder and exhaustion. He'd been awake for days, coordinating security, hunting threats, trying to stay ahead of people who wanted him broken. They knew about the facility. His voice was flat, dead. Had to be an inside leak. Someone close. How close? Close enough to know surgical schedules and security rotations. He looked at Elara, really looked at her, and she saw something crack in his expression. "I can't protect you if my own people are selling information." "Then stop trying to protect me and just get these babies out." Her hands moved to her belly, feeling the girls shift restlessly. "Nothing else matters. Not your empire. Not revenge, just them." He nodded once and led her inside. The backup facility was smaller, older, less equipped than the first. A converted warehouse with medical equipment that looked secondhand and a staff of 3, a surgeon, an anesthesiologist, and a nurse who all carried weapons alongside their stethoscopes. "We can do the C-section here," the surgeon said, examining the setup with professional skepticism. "But if there are complications, if the babies need advanced NICU support, then we deal with it." Damien's tone left no room for argument. "She's 34 weeks. They're big enough, strong enough. Make it work." The surgeon nodded grimly and started prepping. Elara changed into a surgical gown in a room that smelled like disinfectant and rust. Her hands shook as she tied the strings, her mind cycling through everything that could go wrong. Surgical complications, hemorrhaging, babies too small to breathe on their own, infection. Another attack while she was opened on a table. A knock on the door. "It's me," Damien's voice. "Come in." He entered slowly, still wearing the same blood-stained clothes from days ago, looking like he'd aged a decade in the span of weeks. He held something in his hands, a small box wrapped in plain paper. "I don't know if this is appropriate." He set the box on the counter. "But I wanted you to have it, before, in case—" "Don't!" Elara cut him off. "Don't say in case something happens. Nothing's going to happen." "You don't know that. I know I've survived everything you and this city and your enemies have thrown at me. I'm not dying on a surgical table after making it this far." She opened the box. Inside were 2 delicate silver bracelets, infant-sized, each engraved with a name. Aria, Sienna. "I didn't know if you'd chosen names yet," Damien said quietly. "But those were my grandmother's favorites. Strong names, survivors' names." Elara lifted one bracelet, feeling its weight, reading the inscription over and over until the letters blurred. "They're beautiful. They're yours. The girls are yours. Everything I promised, the money, the freedom, the fresh start, all of it's in place. After today, you disappear, and I never interfere. Never reach out. Never complicate their lives with mine. And if they ask about you someday, tell them the truth. That their father was a monster who almost destroyed everyone he touched. That they're better off without me." He moved toward the door.
I'll be in the observation room during the surgery. After they're born, after you've held them, and the doctor confirms everyone's stable, I'll leave. You'll never have to see me again. Damien, it's better this way." The door closed behind him. Elara stood alone, holding tiny silver bracelets meant for daughters who'd never know their father, and felt something inside her chest that wasn't quite grief, but wasn't relief either. Just exhaustion. Just the weight of surviving. Bug. They wheeled her into surgery at dawn. Bright overhead lights, sterile equipment, the surgeon's calm voice walking her through each step, while the anesthesiologist prepared the epidural that would numb her from the chest down. Through a window, she could see Damien standing in the observation room with Marco and 3 other soldiers, all armed, all watching for threats even here. The epidural took effect quickly, her legs going numb, her belly losing sensation. The surgeon erected a curtain so she couldn't see the actual incision, but she felt pressure, tugging, the strange, disconnected sensation of someone rearranging her internal organs. "First baby's crowning," the surgeon announced. "Heart rate strong, good size. Here we go." A cry split the air. Not Elara's. Her daughter's. Loud, furious, indignant at being evicted from the only home she'd ever known. "It's a girl!" The nurse held up a tiny squirming body covered in vernix and blood and life. "Good lungs on this one." They whisked her away to be cleaned and weighed while the surgeon returned to Elara's open belly. "Second baby's in position. This one's smaller. Might be quieter. There." Another cry. Softer than her sister's, but just as determined. Another girl, both babies breathing on their own. No respiratory distress. Elara's vision blurred with tears she didn't remember starting to cry. "Can I see them?" "In just a minute. Let us get them cleaned up." The explosion shattered the world into chaos. Not in the surgery room. Outside, somewhere close. The building shook. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed. Through the observation window, Elara saw Damien and his soldiers draw weapons and rush toward the door. "Keep working," Damien's voice carried through the intercom. "Don't stop the surgery." More explosions, gunfire. The surgeon's hands never wavered. "Suturing now. Stay calm, Mrs. Viscari. Whatever's happening out there, in here, we finish this." Elara lay on the table, numb and opened and utterly helpless, while her daughters cried in warming beds across the room, and somewhere beyond the walls, men fought and died over territory and revenge and grudges she'd never asked to be part of. The surgery took 15 more minutes. 15 minutes of steady hands and professional focus, while the world outside tried to tear itself apart. When they finally closed her incision and helped her into a wheelchair, Elara's first coherent thought was her daughters. The nurse brought them over, 2 tiny bundles wrapped in standard-issue hospital blankets, their faces red and scrunched and absolutely perfect. Aria's the bigger one. 5 pounds, 3 ounces. Sienna's 4 pounds, 11 ounces. Both healthy. Both fighting mad about being born. Elara held them, one in each arm, feeling their warmth, their weight, their realness. These weren't concepts anymore, not ultrasound images or kicks against her ribs. These were people. Her people. 2 tiny humans who'd survived everything the world had thrown at them before they'd even learned how to breathe. "Hello," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm your mom. I'm so sorry about everything, but we made it. We're here." Aria yawned. Sienna's tiny hand curled around Elara's finger. The gunfire outside intensified. Marco burst through the door, blood on his jacket, his expression grim. "We need to move. Now." They breached the perimeter. "Boss is holding them, but we're outnumbered." "I just had surgery." "I know, but staying here means dying here." He grabbed the wheelchair handles. "Ambulance is ready. Doctor's coming with us. We move fast, we might make it." The nurse helped secure the babies in portable carriers while Elara bit back screams from the pain of movement so soon after being cut open. Her abdomen felt like it was tearing apart. Blood seeped through her bandages. They rushed through hallways that echoed with violence, the sharp crack of pistols, the sustained roar of automatic weapons, men shouting orders, someone screaming. The ambulance waited in the loading bay, engine running. The doctor climbed in first, then Marco carefully loaded the baby carriers, then finally helped Elara onto the gurney despite her protests that she could handle the pain. "Where's Damien?" she asked. "Buying time. He'll catch up." That's a lie. Marco's silence was answer enough.
The ambulance pulled out into gray morning light just as another explosion rocked the building behind them. Through the back windows, Elara watched the facility collapse. Walls crumbling, fire blooming, smoke rising into the sky like a funeral pyre. Damien was still inside, fighting. Probably dying. The father her daughters would never meet. "Go back," Elara heard herself say. Marco shook his head. Boss's orders were clear. Get you and the girls to safety. Nothing else matters. He's going to die. He knows. The words hit like bullets. This had been Damien's plan all along. Draw the attack to himself. Let them think they'd won. Buy enough time for Elara and the babies to escape while he made his final stand. Redemption through sacrifice. The most expensive apology he could make. Elara held her daughters close, feeling them breathe, watching the burning building disappear in the distance, and understood with terrible clarity that this was the ending. Not the one she'd imagined during those long months of imprisonment and fear. Not the fairy tale where love conquered trauma and families healed. Just the messy, brutal truth of survival. She'd lived. Her daughters had lived. And the man who'd almost destroyed all of them had finally chosen something more important than his empire. The ambulance raced through empty industrial roads while behind them, a war ended in fire and blood, and the kind of violence that made headlines but never told the real story. They drove for 2 hours before Marco was satisfied they weren't being followed. The safe house was actually safe this time. A cottage on the coast, isolated, anonymous, the kind of place where people came to disappear. The doctor set up in the master bedroom, checking Elara's incision, monitoring the babies, administering antibiotics and pain medication. "You're healing well considering you just ran for your life hours after major surgery," he said dryly. "But you need rest, complete bed rest. No stress, no—" He gestured vaguely at everything. "No, whatever that was." After he left, Elara sat in bed with her daughters sleeping in bassinets on either side of her. She couldn't stop looking at them, couldn't stop counting their fingers and toes and checking that they were still breathing. Arya slept like she was angry about it. Sienna slept like she'd made peace with the world. Already so different, already themselves. Marco knocked on the door at sunset. "You should see this." She found him in the living room, television on, news coverage showing aerial footage of the destroyed facility. 15 dead, 23 injured. Authorities calling it gang warfare. Speculation about organized crime and federal investigations. No mention of a pregnant woman or newborn twins. No mention of the man who'd spent his final hours making sure they escaped. "Did they find him?" Elara's voice was barely above a whisper. Marco's expression was carefully neutral. No confirmed casualties yet. Building still too hot to search properly. Could be days before. His phone rang. He answered, listened, his face going pale. "Yeah, understood. I'll tell her." He hung up slowly. "What?" Elara's heart hammered. "What happened?" "Boss just called from a hospital in Jersey. He's alive, burned, shot twice, but alive." The relief hit so hard Elara had to sit down. "How—" "He made it to the roof before the building collapsed, jumped into the river, swam until Nico's crew found him." Marco shook his head in disbelief. "Bastard's too stubborn to die." "Nico's alive?" 3 surgeries and 2 months in ICU, but yeah, he survived the quarry." Elara pressed her hands against her face, trying to process that everyone she'd thought dead or dying had somehow clawed their way back to life. "Does Damien know about the girls?" "I sent photos. He knows they're healthy, knows you're safe." "Did he say anything?" Marco pulled out his phone, showing her a text message. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her they're beautiful. Tell her I'm done." 3 sentences, final, absolute. What does done mean? He's dissolving the organization, turning witness, making a deal with the feds to dismantle every operation in exchange for immunity and witness protection. Marco pocketed his phone. "In 6 months, Damien Vescari won't exist. He'll be someone else somewhere else, living a boring life where nobody tries to kill him. And us? You get exactly what he promised. Freedom, money, a chance to disappear and raise those girls without his world bleeding into theirs." Marco moved toward the door. "I've got your new identities ready. Passports, birth certificates, bank accounts. By tomorrow, you'll be Elena Russo from Barcelona. The babies will be Arya and Sienna Russo. Your old life ends tonight. What about you?
I'm already dead on paper. New name, new face, new life in Australia or New Zealand or somewhere they don't have winters. He smiled sadly. We all get fresh starts. Some of us just paid higher prices than others. After he left, Elara returned to her daughters. Elena returned to her daughters. She was Elena now. Had to be. The girl named Elara Vescari had died somewhere between a quarry and a burning building and a surgical table where she'd been split open and sewn back together. What remained was someone harder, scarred, but alive. She picked up Arya, the bigger, angrier twin, and held her close, feeling the solid weight of her, the way she frowned even in sleep like she was already planning her first rebellion. Your father almost killed us, Elena whispered, but then he saved us. I don't know what that makes him. Hero or villain or just another broken man trying to do better too late. Arya yawned, unimpressed by philosophical dilemmas. Elena laughed, actually laughed for the first time in months, and felt something inside her chest that had been frozen since her wedding day begin to thaw. Not forgiveness. She wasn't sure she'd ever forgive Damien for the beatings and the imprisonment and the months of terror, but maybe something close to understanding, maybe even the beginning of peace. The meets. 5 years later, Barcelona glittered beneath Mediterranean sunshine. The apartment overlooking the Gothic Quarter was small by mansion standards, but enormous by normal human metrics. 3 bedrooms, a balcony with views of the cathedral, enough space for 2 growing girls to run wild. Elena stood at the kitchen counter, cutting fruit for lunch, while her daughters argued in the living room about whose turn it was to control the television remote. The argument was in English mixed with Spanish and occasionally Catalan, a linguistic cocktail that reflected their complicated multicultural life. Arya, let your sister pick one show. Elena's voice carried through the apartment with the practiced authority of 5 years of single motherhood. But she always picks the boring one. Then maybe you should learn to appreciate boring things. Elena brought the fruit plate into the living room where Arya sat cross-legged on the floor, dark hair and wild curls, her father's eyes flashing with indignation. Sienna occupied the couch, calmer, more measured, already trying to negotiate a compromise. 5 years old and already themselves. Already perfect. Elena had built a good life here. Not perfect. She still woke sometimes in cold sweats, dreaming about quarries and gunfire and men trying to kill her. But good, real, hers. She'd started a consulting business, something with international trade that used her languages and the skills she'd learned navigating her father's debts. It paid well enough that the offshore account Damien had set up remained mostly untouched, sitting there like insurance against futures she hoped would never arrive. The girls went to a private bilingual school where nobody asked questions about their father. Elena told them simple truths adapted for children's understanding. Daddy lived far away. Daddy loved them, but couldn't be with them. Daddy had made mistakes and was trying to fix them. Someday, when they were older, she'd tell them the full truth, but not yet. Not while they still believed the world was mostly safe and parents were mostly good and love was simpler than it actually was. The doorbell rang. Elena froze. Nobody rang their doorbell. She'd designed her life specifically to avoid unexpected visitors. Groceries were delivered. Friends were scheduled. The building had security that screened everyone. Stay here, she told the girls, her voice sharper than intended. She approached the door carefully, checking the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, tall, thin, wearing glasses and a beard that hadn't existed 5 years ago, baseball cap pulled low, completely ordinary except for the way he held himself, the posture of someone who'd spent years learning how to hurt people efficiently. Elena's hand moved to the panic button hidden beside the door frame. Then the man looked up at the peephole. Those eyes. Dark. Tired. Haunted by things that would never fully heal. She knew those eyes. Her hand trembled as she unlocked the door and opened it slowly. You're supposed to be dead. Her voice came out strangled. I got better. Damien's voice was different. Softer. Rougher. Like he'd forgotten how to project authority and was still learning how to just exist. Can I come in? Just for a minute. I won't stay long. Elena glanced back at her daughters, who'd frozen mid-argument, staring at the stranger in the doorway with open curiosity. Every instinct screamed to slam the door. Lock it.
Call Marco or the police or whoever handled situations where your reformed mafia husband appeared after 5 years of supposed witness protection. But she stepped aside and let him enter. Damien moved into the apartment like he was walking through a museum, careful, reverent, afraid to touch anything. His eyes tracked over the space, taking in the evidence of the life she'd built. Photos on walls, toys scattered across floors, the smell of coffee and childhood. Then his gaze landed on Arya and Sienna. He stopped breathing. The girls stared back, their expressions ranging from confused to cautious. "Who are you?" Arya asked with the bold suspicion of a 5-year-old who'd been taught not to trust strangers. Damien opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Elena with something desperate in his eyes. "This is..." Elena's throat closed. She'd rehearsed this conversation in her head 1,000 times and still had no idea what to say. "This is your father." Silence crashed through the apartment. Arya's eyes went wide. "Our daddy? The one who lives far away?" "Yes." "Why are you here?" Sienna asked, her voice quieter, but no less pointed. "Mama said you couldn't visit." "I wasn't supposed to." Damien knelt slowly, bringing himself to their eye level. "But I had to see you, just once, just to know you're okay." "We're okay," Arya said with absolute certainty. "Mama takes care of us." "I know she does." He looked at Elena, his expression cracking. "She's the strongest person I've ever met." "Are you staying?" Sienna asked. "No, I can't. It's not." He struggled for words a 5-year-old would understand. "I'm not safe for you to be around. Bad people might be looking for me, and I can't let anything happen to you." "Are you a bad guy?" Arya's question was direct, unfiltered. Damien's laugh came out broken. "I used to be. I hurt people, did terrible things. I'm trying to be better now, but the person I was before, he doesn't get to be a father. He doesn't deserve you." "That's not fair," Sienna said with the earnest injustice of a child who still believed the world should make sense. "Mama says everyone deserves chances." "Your mother is kinder than I deserve." Elena felt tears building behind her eyes. "Why are you really here, Damien?" He stood slowly, keeping his distance, his hands in his pockets like he was afraid of what he might do with them otherwise. "I'm sick. Cancer, stage 4. Started 2 months ago. Doctors say I have maybe a year, maybe less." He met her eyes. "I wanted to see them once before I die. To know they're real. To know I didn't just destroy everything for nothing." The words landed like bullets. "You could have called. You changed your number. I changed everything. That was the deal." "I know." He looked at his daughters, really looked at them, like he was trying to memorize their faces. "I'm not asking for anything, not asking to stay or visit or be part of their lives. I just needed to see that they're happy, that you're happy, that something good came from all that horror." "They're perfect," Elena said, her voice breaking. "And I'm managing. We're managing." "I can see that." Damien moved toward the door. "I'll go now. I'm sorry for showing up like this. I'm sorry for everything." "Wait." The word escaped before Elena could stop it. He paused, hand on the doorknob. "The girls should know you, not the monster, not the man you were, but the person you're trying to be." She looked at her daughters, then back at him. "You have a year, maybe. Don't waste it hiding. Don't let them grow up with nothing but questions." "Elena, I'm not saying move in. I'm not saying we're a family. I'm saying they deserve to meet their father before he's gone." She took a shaky breath. "And maybe you deserve to know what you almost destroyed was worth saving." Damien's eyes filled with tears he was too proud or too broken to let fall. I can't." "You can try. That's all anyone asks. Try." He looked at Arya and Sienna, who watched this adult drama with the confused intensity of children who didn't understand all the words but recognized the emotion behind them. "Would you..." His voice cracked. "Would you like to hear a story? About where you came from?" Arya nodded eagerly. Sienna hesitated, then nodded too. Damien sat on the floor. This man who'd once commanded criminal empires, who'd killed people with his own hands, who'd spent 36 years building walls between himself and anything resembling vulnerability, and started talking. He told them about their grandmother who loved flowers and their grandfather who built things with his hands. He told them about a city across the ocean where they were born during a storm. He told them carefully edited versions of truth, enough to be real, vague enough to be safe. He didn't tell them about guns or blood or the way their mother had almost died bringing them into the world. But he told them they were wanted, loved, that their very existence had changed everything. Elena watched from the kitchen doorway, tears streaming down her face, feeling something inside her chest that wasn't quite forgiveness, but wasn't hatred either. Just the exhausted recognition that life was messy and complicated and people were capable of being both terrible and decent, sometimes in the same breath. When the story ended, Arya climbed into Damien's lap like she'd known him forever. Sienna stayed cautious but moved closer. "Are you going to die soon?" Arya asked with the blunt honesty of a child who hadn't learned to soften hard questions. "Probably. That's sad." "Yeah, it is." "Will it hurt?" "Maybe. But I've hurt before. I can handle it." Sienna touched his hand gently. "We'll remember you. Mama can show us pictures and tell us stories." "I'd like that." They sat together in the sunlight streaming through Barcelona windows. A man who'd spent his life choosing violence, a woman who'd survived that violence, and two little girls who represented the possibility that broken things could still create something beautiful. It wasn't redemption. Redemption required earning forgiveness, and some debts could never be fully repaid. But it was something, a beginning, or maybe an ending, or perhaps just a middle chapter in a story that was still being written. Damien stayed for 2 hours. Then he left, promising to return next week if Elena allowed it. She allowed it. Not because she'd forgiven him, not because she trusted him, not because she believed a year of visits could erase 3 years of trauma, but because her daughters deserved to know where they came from, even if that origin story included darkness. Because denying them their father, flawed and dying as he was, felt like perpetuating the same cycles of absence and pain that had defined her own childhood. And because somewhere beneath the scars and the fear and the memories of rain-soaked quarries, she remembered that human beings were capable of change, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. After he left, Elena held her daughters close and answered their 1,000 questions as honestly as she could. Yes, Daddy had made big mistakes. Yes, he'd hurt people. Yes, he was trying to be better now. Yes, it was complicated. Yes, life was often complicated. Yes, they were safe. Always safe. She would make sure of that. That night, after the girls were asleep, Elena stood on the balcony watching the city lights, feeling the Mediterranean breeze, thinking about the girl she'd been 6 years ago. Terrified, trapped, convinced survival meant making herself small. She'd been so wrong. Survival meant fighting, adapting, refusing to let other people's violence define the limits of your world. Survival meant raising daughters who asked hard questions and demanded real answers. Survival meant learning that some endings weren't clean and some beginnings started with blood, and some stories couldn't be categorized as pure tragedy or triumph because life existed in the messy space between. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Thank you. For today. For them. For not giving up when giving up would have been easier. You saved us all. D." Elena stared at the message for a long time, then she deleted it and blocked the number. Not because she was angry, not because she hadn't meant what she said about the girls knowing their father, but because she needed to maintain boundaries, needed to remember that kindness didn't equal reconciliation, and allowing limited contact didn't mean forgetting everything that came before. She'd survived by learning when to open doors and when to keep them locked. This door would stay cracked, not wide open, but not sealed shut either. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was the only ending anyone got in real life. Not perfect, not tragic, just human. Just the messy, complicated truth of people trying their best and failing and trying again, and sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, managing to create small moments of grace among all the wreckage. Elena returned inside, checked on her sleeping daughters one more time, and climbed into bed. Tomorrow she'd wake up and make breakfast and take the girls to school and live the ordinary life she'd fought so hard to build. And next week, Damien would visit again. They'd navigate the awkwardness and the history and the 1,000 unspoken truths that lived in the space between them. And somehow, impossibly, they'd survive. Because survival was what they did best. All of them. Together and apart. broken and healing, flawed and trying, human.